Welcome to Just to Know You, the podcast that interviews regular people at SAES and finds out they are far from regular.
That's right. I'm your host, Darian Batten.
And I'm Angela Kerskaden.
Let's get started.
All right. Welcome, Just to Know You listeners. I have with me our special guest, Mr. Zion Russell. He's been an advocate for 7 years, but has joined Darian this year, teaching math and science and also robotics. And we're so happy to have you. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Zion.
Hey, you bet, man. Thanks for having me on.
How has your journey to Saudi Aramco expatriate schools unfolded?
All right. Well, we were sitting, my wife and I graduated. I got my master's in teaching in New York, and she got her law degree. And we were looking at places to move to, and I'd commercial fish for 10 summers up in Alaska. All the men in my family are all commercial fishermen up there. So like that show Deadliest Catch, that's us. And there was 10,000 people taking the New York bar exam, and there were 40 people taking the Alaska bar exam. And I was like, hey, you want to go to Alaska for a year? And so 1 year turned into 10. And so we were up there about 10 years, and my wife is from Turkey. And so getting to Turkey was a bit of a hike from there, just because of geography. And so we were looking to move closer to her family. Her father had passed, so we were looking to move actually to Turkey. And so I went down to the Northern Iowa State Teacher Fair and was looking to get some jobs in Turkey. And all of a sudden, like last minute show up, this company called Aramco was there to hire people. And so I thought I'd go in and they'd be my warm-up interview before I started interviewing with the Turkish schools. And so I go in, meet the guys, it's Brad Goth and Danny, and had a good time with them. Said, thanks guys, but I'm already going to the school in Turkey. It's nice to meet you though. And interviewed with a couple other schools around the Middle East, including the Riyadh and Jeddah, and just had a really good time. And it was funny though, because they were all like, who else are you interviewing with? I was like, I'm interviewing with Aramco. Like, well, when you're done with them, come see us. And the Jeddah school was really tempting because they were looking for a physics teacher who could also teach robotics, who also wanted to open an engineering academy. And those are our three things I did up in Alaska with some help of some great coworkers and leadership, some great principals. So the Turkey thing kind of fell through just because of the way the climate was, and they had the coup that following year. So we were sitting there, and it was like, I remember calling my wife from Iowa. She's up with both kids at indoor soccer in the winter. And I was like, hey, how do you feel about Saudi Arabia? And she hung up. And I called her back and I explained the deal and how she'd be able, our sons were young then, they were 5 and 3. And one of her regrets is all of her older sisters have been able to stay home with their kids when they were growing up. And she was a lawyer doing adult guardianship, so she didn't have that opportunity. And so moving to Aramco puts us 4 hours away from Turkey, and it put us in a position where she could stay home with the boys.
Man, look at you! You checked all the boxes in your marriage in one move.
I know, right?
That's master craftsmanship.
Work out, it's a long play, right? It's a long play.
We want to slowly unpack that because there are a lot of amazing aspects of your life that we want to dig into. So first, Alaska. Alaska is like, America, but a whole entity unto itself. 3 times the size of Texas. We don't even think about it like that because it's not within the 48 continuous states. So Alaska, how is Alaska? Question 1 and 2, how come you're not fishing?
How's Alaska? Alaska is great, man. If you are looking to be active, it is an amazing place. And there's so much to do in the summer because it's so light. And then in the winter, you've got skiing and snowshoeing, cross country, and you got sledding and snowmobiling, and all these different activities. Where if you want to live that adventure lifestyle, it's a great place. One of the first things my wife and I did was enter a snowshoe race. And I was like, the only rule is we can't finish last. we got to at least beat someone. So,
and how'd you do?
We beat one person. Yeah. I was sitting there, my wife and I were starting to jog a little bit. I'm like, don't let that person hear that music. Don't let them hear that Chariots of Fire music. Keep going. And So that was a lot of fun. We had a great time up there, met some great people. And then not fishing, my dad he commercial fished 40 years. And, my Uncle Russ commercial fished 40 years. My cousins all commercial fished. And the one thing my dad said is that he had said, I don't want you in this lifestyle, because he was gone 6 to 7 months a year commercial fishing. But like the sea was in his blood. I mean, it's one of those old sailor types. And, really to this day, like whenever we go out to the beach, he just sits in a chair and chills. And that was his element. Yeah, he's been up the Yukon River 4 times, and he's been all the way up to Nome, Alaska, up on the north coast, probably 20 times. He's done the Inside Passage probably 20 times to 30 times. And he is an old boat captain, man.
Now, do you feel that in your blood? Do you feel the calling of the sea or of the water?
Yeah, I spent 10 summers on the water with him in one winter, and I definitely feel it. But I think it's one of the reasons I became a teacher, is because I knew that when my kids were off school, I'd be off school, so we could all hang. In that aspect, stemming from not having that time with my dad, I think really played a role in what career I chose, but also gave me a really cool opportunity to go up and be with him for 2.5, 3 months every summer. That was just him and I. Once I turned 14 and I could be on the insurance for the boat, I was up there, man, and it was awesome. Yeah.
And were you part of, did you participate in commercial fishing?
Yeah, no, that's what I did for 10 summers and one winter.
Like you worked on a commercial fishing vessel?
Yeah, I worked on probably, maybe 8 or 9 different boats, all the way from like little 10-meter gill netters to 150 foot, 170 foot crabbers.
And what was that like?
It was really interesting. You get to know people really well. When you're 4 people or 3 people on a little 35-foot boat, you get to know people well, and then they're all characters. Like the names of the guys I worked with were Machine Gun Kip and Vampire Bill, and then it was and there's a reason they had those names, and it was really interesting to see people and see the kind of types of people that got drawn to those jobs. Right, it's work hard, get paid well, go blow it all real fast, come back out for the next season. A month later you're back, you got to work again because you blew your money through. And so that aspect was interesting as a 14-year-old to see that. And then the other aspect I'd say was just the beauty. I mean, you're up in bays and bights on the coast that a handful of people have been to in the history, of motorized vehicles. Anyway, I know that indigenous people have been up there for a lot longer, but it was just gorgeous. And being up there when there's no sunset and just seeing the sun go from the left side to the right side and then back again, that was a hell of a thing to do while you're working. And just like all of a sudden kind of look up and be like, oh, it's 2 a.m. and it's still sunny.
And so it's interesting that your dad invited you at such a young age into that experience, because it seemed like he deemed it necessary for your development.
I don't know if he deemed it necessary. I just wanted to get away from my mom. That's her and I, when I was younger, we had a little bit of an adversarial relationship, right, just because of my dad being gone, and we were mad at my dad, but we only had each other to take it out.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was, at the age of 12, I was working at a summer camp as a lifeguard. so I was like already, my summers I was outside, and I was, not out on my own because it was, a summer camp, but I was out of the house.
And so you've been working since 12.
Yeah, but then before that, I ran a golf ball hustle.
So explain to us what a golf ball hustle is.
Well, my buddies and I, we lived out in the woods. I mean, like the woods. And there was a really nice golf course, maybe a 20-minute bike ride from our house. So my buddy Chris and I, we would always roll out, and the evenings and the mornings, and go swim through the creek that went through the golf course, and we'd pick all the golf balls out that people had lost, and then we'd set up right next to the ninth hole, selling golf balls back for $0.25. Right? Or like the really nice ones, like 50 cents. We even had like bulk deals, right? Like you buy the whole bag, it's only $10. and we were knee deep in ice cream and video games every summer. And eventually it got to the point where they hired like a teenage course marshal in like a golf cart to come harass us.
Yeah.
And then we were just like, how about we just, it was minimum wage in the 80s. So we're just like, how about we cut you in on some? That just seems easier than you chasing us and us getting away from you every night. So
Did
we
they
cut
bite?
him in, and we cut him in. He was no dope. And so we just, cut him in. Then we ended up with like 8 people in our crew who were hunting golf balls, and this guy was on the take, and it worked out great for a couple summers, man.
So it seems like you've been hustling since your early ages.
I've been working. Yeah.
How do you apply the hustle to your classroom? No, you don't have to answer. You don't have to answer that question.
No, it's all right. It is just the idea that there's, you can always be doing something. There can always, when someone says, "Oh, I couldn't do this," oh, you couldn't, or you just make time for it, right? And that's something that we teach. We're trying to teach teenagers, right? Is there's a difference between I couldn't do it and I didn't do it. I didn't make it. Well, what time did you get home? I got home at 3:30. Well, what time was football practice? 6:30. What'd you do for 3 hours? Well, how about this morning? What time did you wake up? I woke up at 7:30. You're like, oh, hey. Well, there you go, right? It's a choice. Not necessarily I couldn't, but I didn't.
For those of you just tuning in, we're with Mr. Zion, the Hustle Russell, and he is keying us into how he utilizes hustle within his classroom.
That was my nickname when I was teaching in New York. It was our hustle.
Really?
Yeah, I had some real interesting characters in my class that taught me a lot about teaching, especially at a young age. I was right out of my undergrad was physics, and then I was teaching in inner city New York for 3 years, and learned a lot, and was honored to be named our hustle by a group of my students.
How was your teaching experience? Because this is before Alaska. How was your teaching experience in inner city New York, coming from you said New York City teaching college?
It was Syracuse, New York, so it was a little bit out of the
yeah.
But it was interesting because the Syracuse University is up on a hill, and honest to goodness, there's railroad tracks, and then the schools I was teaching in, and that was a big shock for me. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I think we had my 1,600 students at my school. I think we had 3 students of color, maybe 4, and so it was a really eye-opening experience for me as a kid, and as a young adult, because I had this view of America. I had this view of, it's about how hard you work, and, it's a level playing field. And I realized when I went there, I was like, oh, this is not a level playing field. This is far from that. And I didn't know that. And I think that was a good epiphany for me as a young man to see that, experience it. And I love teaching there. And it taught me a lot, man. My best friend during my grad school years, this guy named Chris, he graduated from the school we taught at. He went out on a basketball scholarship, got his degree in science and teaching, and he and I were in our master's program together, teaching at his old high school. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah, he and I together, like we'd show up at master's courses, and the other teachers there have these amazing, beautiful science lessons. Just you're like, oh, that's just wonderful, and he'd just be like, that's not going to work in a classroom. You ever tried doing that? Are you kidding me? And it's just great to have him there because he was super passionate, and he still teaches at the same high school he graduated from, Corcoran High School, and he's still there. And just because he's like, this is my neighborhood, it's where I grew up, and I want to make it better. And I was just like, yeah.
You've told us that you moved around quite a lot. When you say the Pacific Northwest, what specifically do you mean?
So for me, I grew up in a place called Bellingham, Washington, about an hour and a half north of Seattle, maybe 15, 20 minutes from the border with Canada. And it's a big fishing community. You got Bellingham Bay up there. So it was a great place for my dad to be, put the boat there for the winter and work on it, or in the off season and work on it when it wasn't being used.
So you fly from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast.
Oh, we drove. No, we drove.
You drove?
Yeah. I was like, my wife was, she was my wife at the time, and she said, I'm going to law school in Syracuse. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to grad school over there too. And I was like, that was like the point when I realized like that was the woman I was going to marry. I was like, that's it. She's going, I'm going.
Smart man. And so
Yeah.
you go there, and then you say, you know what, we're going to go to Alaska. So did you drive, or did you
Well,
fly?
so my wife and I got married in Turkey, and while we were doing that, her passport got stolen. And so I actually flew back to the States by myself and then drove from Syracuse, New York up to Anchorage, Alaska with my Honda Civic and a U-Haul trailer. And it got a little sketchy a couple places. I'm not going to lie. The Alcan, the Alaskan Canada Highway, a couple places then started slipping backwards on some mud. I was like, that's it.
Really?
It's been a good run.
Well, if anybody's out there looking for a car, Honda Civic, just know you heard it here first. Very, very reputable brand will get you from New York to Alaska with a
just
U-Haul
looking at me
trailer.
with towing this trailer like, what is that? Who? Somebody talk to him.
Who is towing a trailer bigger than their car? That is awesome. So from the Pacific Northwest to New York, then to Alaska, and then to Saudi Arabia. Of those places, which has been the most difficult place to live, and why was it a struggle?
Oh man, I think each one presents its own challenge. Like Pacific Northwest, wet and cold in the winter, right? So you just gotta buy into that and be okay with the gray days, right? And then Alaska, same thing. Like it is dark for 3 months, and you maybe get a couple hours of light, but it doesn't get real warm. And then you've got snow on the ground for 6 to 9 months out of the year. And it's so if that can get wearing when not so much when you're just you and your spouse or just you, but when you've got kids. And so, the kids were growing up. We want to go outside. Okay, it's going to take us 10 minutes to put on our big, we call them zoot suits, big, like giant onesies for kids that are like, weatherproof. And so, that was, I think, challenging. And then, like, looking ahead to sports and having activities, my wife and I were okay going out hiking or camping in, 20 degrees and negative 20 degrees. But boy, we didn't feel the same way about having kids doing that. But on the other hand, the spring, summers, and early fall are just gorgeous. There's these huge 5,000 acre parks out there called King and Cade Park. And we just took the kids out there, and in the summer, we just walk. We go out for our morning walk, go stop by the local Greasy Spoon, Tasty Free is the name of it, and hit that up on the way home. And then, KSA wasn't too big of a transition for us because my wife and I were Muslim. And so she's from Turkey, and I already learned Turkish, so learning the language wasn't going to be too hard. And the biggest challenge, I think, for us here was the inconsistency, right? So, like, some things happen immediately, and it's smooth, and you're like, this is phenomenal. And then other things are like, hey, I need to get a new license plate. Oh, it's going to be 3 months. You're like, wait, what? No, you got to talk to this guy, and this guy's going to have you go talk to that guy. It's like, it's funny which things, the more complicated things tend to be more fluid, I find. Like, I need a visa. I'm just going to go online, click, I got my visa. Whereas, other stuff is like, oh, well, this is going to be more challenging. This is going to, how many people who you know? And so it's, I think they each present their own challenge. I don't think anyone's harder than any other one because when we were here, it was beautiful being 4 hours away from Turkey. I think the first year, every single long weekend, every single break, we went to Turkey to see that family. My wife's got 5 older sisters, so it's a big family. I'm an only child. And so that was just great.
What about you talked about going to Turkey quite often. What is it that you love about Turkey?
For me, it's my family. I've got 5 sisters-in-law, 5 brothers-in-law. I've got, I want to say, somewhere between 13 and 16 nephews and nieces over there. And for me, it's just fun having a big family. I went from being a family of 3 to a family like 33 when I got married. Yeah, and that was just great because they all care for each other. It doesn't matter if they're yelling or screaming at each other. They'd all give each other a kidney, in a heartbeat. So that was a nice part. And then up there, in a lot of the ways, my wife's father was a farmer, and so it was a real simple. And there was a summer house up in the mountains, and it was like, when I say summer house, I mean like if you wanted hot water, you had to go build a fire and heat up the water. And that just really appealed to me because of the Alaska stuff. I think that really, for me, was a simple way. I'm an Eagle Scout, So I always like camping. I always like the idea of being out there in nature, and I just love it. And the food's just stellar.
Also, where specifically does most of your family stay?
My family's actually mostly from Adana right now. I've got a couple of nephews and nieces in Istanbul, but right around that area, they actually got hit by the earthquake the other week
Really?
and yesterday. And thankfully they're all okay. And that was a concern for a couple of days there, but everyone's all right, which is nice. But yeah, Adana's the home region there, and then Istanbul is like secondary.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear. I'm happy to hear that everyone is okay.
Thanks, man.
Tell us about your family.
So, I told about my dad. He's a commercial fisherman. My mom was an occupational therapist in the school district for 40 years. So that's, that's where I got that teaching bug from, I think, in part. And I had a couple great teachers in high school that really inspired me. But I've got my wife. Her name's Navis, and she's Turkish, and she has a law degree in her second language, which for me always tells me just how smart she is. When I think like I'm pretty clever, I'm like, no, I'm not. Law degree in my second language. I'm not, an abogado in Espanol. I'm not avukat in Turkish. I'm just, yeah. So, and she is incredibly kind and warm, and family for her is number one, and I can relate to that a lot. And she's just been great. She works for Ramco right now as well as a contract advisor, and I can talk about it because it's February 20 something, and it happened. But she just got done working on the contract for Zoom.
Oh, really?
For Ramco, they announced at Leap and Ictiva, and so she's been working really hard. They sent her to London for a week and Dubai for a week, real hard stuff.
Yeah.
And so she's all done with that, and I'm just really proud of her, and professionally and personally, and as a mom and all that jazz. Anything any husband would say about their wife, right?
Yeah.
So, well, any husband who doesn't want to get in trouble. And and then I got two boys. I've got Khan and Kurai.
Yeah.
They're 12 and 10. And I've got my little Michaela. She's 2.
Oh, man, that's awesome. So you have 3.
Yeah, I've got 3.
Yeah.
And I was worried about 3 because, I'm like, once you get 3, they're like velociraptors. One distracts you from the front, and the other 2 come in on the side, right? And I'm like, there's 2 of us. We can tackle 2 of them. Like, we can hold them down. When there's 3, someone's getting double teamed.
Yeah, it's 3's different. 3 changes the game.
3 changes the game. And it's funny because, I remember her her OB back in the States. I had taught her 3 kids, and she told us don't have 3. The third one's just a mess. And I'm like, no, that's fair. I've had all 3, and that third one, he is a mess. Like mom and dad just threw the towel in. Nope. But no, it's really nice to have Michaela around. She's the older boys, that being 10, 12, they can help out a lot. And they get to be that older brother. And that's really cool.
It's awesome when you can have a family here and supportive. It kind of, balances things out, and you have a strong, foundation to go out there and do, what you need to do. Man, you talked a little bit about your friend that attended with you. I believe his name was Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about Chris and how he just helped you kind of look into those neighborhoods and see new things and places. Tell me about someone who has helped you become the person you are today.
I mean, there's a lot of places to go there, right? There's family, but I think I would single out my wrestling coach. So I wrestled in middle school and high school, and did well and was offered a scholarship at university. And that's all just because of the head coach we had. And he never yelled once. 4 years I was on his team, I didn't hear him yell once. And he was an AP English teacher and just really well thought out, and just discussed how it's going to take hard work. Like wrestling, I always appreciated because it's one-on-one. Team sports, I'd always get angry because there's someone on my team who maybe didn't want as much or didn't want to work as much or wasn't tough enough. In wrestling, there's a team score, but it's an individual competition. And so what he taught me as an athlete and as a person, as a young man, was wildly important, especially because at that time my dad wasn't home in the winters, so he couldn't watch me wrestle. And so he was kind of in loco parentis at that point. And I think one of the best things he taught me was my junior year, I'd gotten 3rd at a tournament, and I was just angry and I was disappointed. And I'd won like 16 matches in a row, and then I came in here and I got beat by what I felt was not a very good guy. And I took my medal, and then at the end, and I threw it in the trash. And I was like, I was just so angry. And he just came up and he just grabbed me, and he brought me over. He's like, "There's dudes here who will never be in a position to get that, and never have the opportunity to get that third place. You go back, you get that, and you hang on to that, and you think about it." And still, like, to this day, I still think about that aspect of it, right? Like, just being in the mix is a reward. It is something that other people may not ever get the chance to do. And whether you win first or win second, it's nice, but at the end, you had this opportunity, you achieved this. And so I've taken that with me throughout my life for sure. And then just the hard work, right? Just, if you want to get better as a wrestler, you've got to train. You got to do it all. And so that work mentality, I think, has paid out throughout my life, as I find myself now at Aramco, right? Which is, the apex job as a teacher, essentially.
Sounds like he taught you less about being grateful, for each and every moment.
Yeah, it was, and my dad emphasizes that too. Like, my dad was happy with how I did as a wrestler, but his proudest moment was when I won the sportsmanship award for the Washington State, and for my district, for my region, and then for the state. And that's what he's most proud of. Like, when we talk to my sons about it, that's what he tells them.
Seems like you've had a lot of just really positive and impactful figures in your life, and you seem to recall them in great detail. If you could meet one historical figure, who would it be and why?
Richard Feynman. He's a famous physicist and scientist, and he did a phenomenal job with explaining really hard concepts really simply. And I see a lot of him in Neil deGrasse Tyson. Right? Neil deGrasse Tyson is this wildly intelligent guy, and there's other people who are probably as smart as him or smarter. But the power, really, the superpower that he has is that he can explain it. He is capable of communicating those really advanced ideas in a really simple and understandable manner. And that, I think, that's who I'd want to hang out with, is him. It's a toss up between Neil and Richard. I'd say either one of them. They're just phenomenal individuals, and as a scientist, I have all this knowledge about all this stuff. And like today, we're talking about quantum mechanics with one student, another student's building a basic robot, another student's doing a double slit, diffraction and experiment. And there's all this data. And sometimes, and even like when I'm teaching algebra or algebra 2 or geometry, it's how do I take this really, this really cool concept that I understand because I've been doing it for 30 years and teach it effectively to a 13-year-old. Right? Like, how can I explain it in a way that they'll understand or they'll be able to grasp it? Whether that's Gardner's multiple intelligences, different, methods, or just being a better communicator.
Which will serve you well in marriage and fatherhood. Oh, that's awesome. Can we just focus? It seems like you have a lot of high-level mathematical concepts that are going on in your head consistently. If you could bring something into existence, something new, something novel into existence from the knowledge that you have, what would it be and why?
It would probably just be replacing like air conditioning here in Saudi Arabia with geothermal cooling. Like, that's probably my biggest thing. As we look at climate change is the big impactful thing that's going on in our world for our not just our generation but the generation before us,
Right.
And those generations after us. One aspect of that is, how do we stop using so much fossil fuels?
Right.
To slow down that curve that we're on. And it's part of the robotics project this year, actually, that my students are working on, is this idea of, hey, instead of just burning natural gas and burning oil to generate electricity to power all this AC, which is a huge energy consumption, why not just use geothermal cooling, which just requires a pump and a hole? They've been working on that, and I think that's probably the big thing right now. Is for me, as I look at the world, is it's cheap, it's easy, it's affordable, it works, especially in America, because we typically live in houses as opposed to apartments.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a way to just make a big impact. And the world gets warmer and warmer and warmer. It's not like it's going to be less important to have air conditioning. People are going to want more of it and desire more of it, and that's going to require a greater burden of burning those natural resources to keep people cool, which is funny. We're burning the stuff that's going to heat up the planet to keep cool.
And it's making it warm.
Yeah. And so it's out there, but it's just, I think that's one thing I would put into like mass production. It's just like, hey, you build in a house, you build in apartments, geothermal cooling, because it's cheap and easy.
Can you explain the process of geothermal cooling and how it works?
Yeah, sure. So basically, you can take a fluid, and air is a fluid, or typically what they actually use is, what is it? It's, gosh dang it, windshield wiper fluid, because it's rated down to like -20 or -40, right? So it doesn't freeze up in your car and cause damage as it expands. And so you just put that into a tube, and basically you're using a heat pump, and you take, in the case of this one, you take warm water that's absorbed like heat from the house, and you pump it down maybe 3 to 6 meters down, where the temperature in the earth is 17 degrees Celsius. So then this hot liquid is there, and it dissipates the heat into the ground, and so the heat transfers from the liquid into the earth, and then that same liquid comes up on the other side of the house, and it's cool. And you pump it through the house, and it pulls in, or not absorbs, but the heat transfers from the warm air in the house into the cool of the liquid. And so basically that's how you run a geothermal cooling system. And the heating works similar. It's just you run the hole deeper, and you go down 15, 20 meters, where it's always 20 degrees or 22 degrees. So now in the winter, when it's 10 degrees outside, you have this, you're pulling heat out of the earth and putting it into the house.
And so now air conditioning units work by what?
Well, it's not too different, but it just requires a lot more energy. So on that system, you just need really a pump and a small heat exchanger to run it. And then with air conditioning, you've got a fan, you've got a compression, you're basically turning liquid into gas and gas into liquid, and this whole process produces a lot of hot air, and not produces hot air, but the way the heat is transferred is just taken from the house and then pushed outside. So if you're living and obviously geothermal cooling really works best with new builds. It's hard to retrofit stuff, apartment buildings especially with it, especially because they're so tight and compact.
Right.
But basically, the air conditioner just uses a different method, and it uses a lot more energy to make that happen.
So it sounds like geothermal cooling would take a little more cost up front to run the piping and things through the walls, but in the long term, it's much more efficient.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. And if you look at, like looking at Europe, now they've got that energy crisis, right, in this winter with the war in Ukraine, with Russia, and all their heating's coming from, or not, I shouldn't say, but a majority of their heating's coming from, burning natural gas to generate steam and spin a turbine and put electricity in their house so they can, turn on electric heat, or to burn it in a furnace at their house. So that's also where you can look at energy independence over time. You want to start building houses with geothermal heating and geothermal cooling in areas where it works. That's one way to be energy independent. Or I should say more energy independent.
Right. Yeah. It's something that I haven't heard in a lot of conversations or at the forefront of any global warming argument. So it's a really neat way, especially in these countries that are very hot for long periods of time.
Right.
And
then it's fun watching my students do the research, because they'll do like little mini labs on it, like to kind of figure out how it works and to explain it as part of their project. And it's fun to watch them work and do it, and then go ask some engineers at Aramco, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because Aramco has a whole division of renewable engineers who are working on wind turbines and solar and all this stuff.
Yeah,
so it's fun for them to have that resource at hand.
It sounds like you're very passionate about this. You're very passionate about the environment and about physics and science as well.
I'm definitely passionate about physics and science and math. The environment, it's one of those things, right? We've got to do something. I mean, I work at an oil company, but I also know we've got to do something, right? There's steps we need to take globally, and if we want to not have as big of an impact as coming down the line.
What inspired your passion for science?
Man, I always loved science fiction as a kid. just really ate it up, and the ideas and concepts. And there's some great fun books I read when I was younger that would always have like an ancillary chapter. How does the warp drive work? How does a mass cannon work? How does this or that work in this universe? And I always thought that was super cool. And then I had Mr. Evans for chemistry, and I had Mr. Crandall, Cranddaddy Cool, for physics in high school. And I was just like, this is it. I want to teach chemistry and physics because this is amazing.
Yeah. It sounds like science has kind of driven your life and kind of guided you along with family and familial decisions where you wanted to go. If you had to leave a legacy for your children and finding that same light for them, what legacy would you want to leave so that they could find their path?
Man, just to pursue what you love, right? My mom and dad always had this line of, there are many things in life that will catch your eye, but few that catch your heart.
Ooh.
Pursue those.
Ooh.
And, and then I would combine that. And the advice I used to give to my seniors who were graduating was, if there's something you want to do, do it. Don't be a coulda, shoulda, woulda. I could have done this. I should have done this.
Yeah.
I would have done this. No. Go try it. It's okay if you fail.
Yeah.
That's part of life, and we learn a lot from that. There's a lot of value there. But go do it and try it. So you can say, you know what? I did try that. I gave it my best shot. And I see it in sports sometimes. Some of my buddies got hurt in their high school career and their early college career. And then they never could quite give it up, right? They're always, I could have done this. I should have done this. And you're like, well, hey man, we're like 30 now.
Right. Yeah.
Like, why are we still hung up on this thing? And sports could be, you could supplant anything else in there I wish I would have learned piano. Why didn't you? Go for it now. And what's cool is the tie-in now with like Empowerment Tuesdays, right?
Yeah.
So we've got these kids out here who are like, I want to learn how to play an electric guitar. Go. I want to learn how to build a robot. Go. I want to build this, or I want to do this. I want to learn how to knit. Yes. Do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then be like, oh man, you may not be good at it, but boy, when you see someone with a felted bag walking down the street, you can be like, oh, I know how that took time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
You are quite good at this, aren't you? Or, whatever the case may be. It gives you, I am terrible at art. I am horrendous, but man, I can appreciate good art. I can appreciate bad art too. But it's just, it's that idea of, even though it's not my jam, I can still value it, and I can still see the skill and passion that went into stuff like that. The same with music, it's with anything. It's just being appreciative of what's out there.
Oh man, well, Mr. Zion, the Hustle Russell, many things have caught my eye. I'm hoping your story would catch the hearts of our listeners because you are a phenomenal individual. Hopefully we'll have more time, maybe at a later date, to pick your mind some more. But we are just so thankful to have you, and we shall see you again one day.
Right on. Darian, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Just to Know You.
We would like to thank our amazing tech man, Mr. Kent Arimura, Sterling McDonald for the podcast music, and the SAES community. See you next time.
If you know anyone who you think has a great story to tell, we would love to hear about it. Please send an email to either Angela, Darian, or Kent.